Right, let's shift focus onto this now. Play-based learning could be a game changer in our education system. It's had an impact on more than 150,000 Jordanian children. Now, in a first of its kind for the continent, the Africa Play Conference is taking place in South Africa. The conference aims to promote quality early childhood learning. Education ministers from across the continent are expected to attend the event, which runs from the 25th to the 27th of February. Let's find out more. I'm joined by Lego Foundation Director Kerry Carson and UNICEF Sanjay Wijesekera. A very good morning to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Kerry, let me start with you. What are we talking about essentially here when we're talking about this kind of learning?
So I think the difference is really looking at a play-based approach and how we look at learning from a very playful attitude. How do we incorporate, some skills and different types of aspects that makes a child think they're actually playing, but we know that they're learning. Right. And I think that's the difference.
Right. And Sanjay, when we look at the Jordanian example, what worked there that we thought we could apply it onto the continent? Right.
So we're still kind of learning about play-based learning and looking at the evidence across the board. I think there are three things that we know how it works and how it helps children. The first is it actually physically builds the brain, right? So and it develops things like what we call executive function. So the ability to set a goal and move towards it without being distracted. It also builds the kind of social skills that we need for the workplace today in the 21st century. So things like collaboration, communication, critical thinking, conceptual thinking. But I think perhaps one of the biggest advantages it kind of builds caring and nurturing relationships between parents, caregivers, and children. And that's really important for the emotional well-being of the child, which is in turn really important in terms of how they learn and how they develop in the future.
Right, so we know about project-based learning, and now we're learning about play-based learning. From what ages to what ages when we talk about play-based learning?
So it can go all the way, up to about 6 years, but even beyond. We're talking about the process of learning, how you not just take in information, but use that information to relate it to the real world.
Right. And Kerry, as Lego, what are some of the maybe things that you do or projects that kids actually do to learn?
So part of what we've done specifically in South Africa, we've worked with parents with Takalani Sesame, which has been one of our really, really fantastic projects, where we really engage with parents and caregivers around the importance of learning through play, which we think is really part of this ecosystem that we want to be a part of in South Africa. Another project that we did was an online play-based system, and that was in partnership with UNICEF and with our a lot of other partners like the Department of Basic Education, Care for Education, Sesame Workshop. And part of this was to do an online training platform, which was entirely play-based. So those are the types of things that we do. Another one that we're about to do, again, in partnership with UNICEF and the Department of Basic Education, is to roll out a set of Duplo bricks, which is 6 bricks that was actually developed here in South Africa. And the idea is to really, do a scale-up in the next couple of years, but we're starting off with a pilot in the Orange Free State, in Gauteng and Johannesburg. And the idea is really to get kids to play with a set of bricks and to see how it helps them develop.
So when you say Duplo bricks, what are we talking about?
So Duplo bricks, I'm sorry that I did not bring a set with me, but they're actually designed for little hands. So they're slightly thicker, and if you see them, you'll recognize them immediately. Okay. They're really great. They're colorful.
Bigger Lego.
They're bigger Lego, and bigger Lego bricks. And I think, they're colorful. They aid with numeracy. They aid with literacy. So many facets. And again, it was developed in South Africa, so which is something that we're incredibly proud of.
Sanjay, in terms of reach, we know the challenges that we face on this continent when it comes to education. It could be an issue of access. It could be an issue of teachers also. How are we going to make sure that we actually reach as many children, especially in the outskirts, as much as possible, and also we get our teachers on par with what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, because it's about how we roll it out and how we get it at scale. And South Africa and the Department of Basic Education here is a leader in that. They've actually internalized into the curricula of ECD and early childhood development and basic education. I think there are, again, a number of different things we can do. The first is working on the capacity of teachers and early childhood development practitioners and supporting them to be able to roll this out well. And there are some tools that Kerry mentioned, by which they feel like their capacity to help children can be built. But I think it goes beyond just the education and the health systems, actually, because health workers also have a role to play in this. But it also goes into homes. So it's important that parents and caregivers also play with their children, promote this kind of learning. Unstructured play whereby you learn how to collaborate, how to negotiate rules, how to imagine and conceptualize things as well. And I think the third element is kind of learning how to monitor and measure the impact. So continuously monitoring whether people are doing it right and whether it's having the right impacts. And I think that's what we need to develop further.
Kerry, what do you say to a parent who says, it's all well and good to send my child to school, but I want them to learn before they play. They can play, but not too much.
We've had a lot of that reaction, actually. And that's actually one of the barriers, I think, that we face in South Africa, where, we've done a needs assessment, we've done a lot of research behind this, and we found that parents instinctively say, well, if my child is playing, they're not learning. And for them, that's the barrier. And I think part of our advocacy is to really say, actually, when they're playing, they're learning a lot more. And if anything, we want to encourage that, and we want parents to know that play is not frivolous. What they're, it's an iterative process, right? As they're breaking things and putting them together and trying new things, they're learning every single step of the way. So in actual fact, it's really a little bit more powerful, especially at a younger age. And we really want to focus that and give them sort of resources and tips on how to do that. How do you do that? And it can happen in everyday life. It's not something that you don't need anything for it, you don't need money to do it. It's something that we can all do as parents.
Sure. Sanjay, let's talk about the conference. We're saying that a number of education ministers from across the continent will be here. What countries are we talking about, and who will be in that room specifically?
So the conference, Africa Play Conference, is being convened by the Department of Basic Education with, of course, partners such as LEGO and ourselves and ADEA and many others coming together. Now, African ministers have been invited, and African governments have been invited, and many of them, I'm pleased to say, many of them have confirmed, and many more will be doing so over the next couple of weeks. Okay. But in addition to countries, we've got experts, researchers, practitioners, civil society, even private sector, and so on, coming together. And what it is the aim of it is, first of all, I think it's for countries that are kind of showing some leadership in it, such as South Africa, to perhaps share some of the lessons they've learned and the challenges they've faced. But and for countries who are a bit further behind, perhaps to look at whether this is the kind of model that they would like to take on. But it's the emphasis is on getting real political commitment to do it, but also kind of practical solutions, and hence why there's such a range of people attending the conference.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. LEGO Foundation's Kerry Carson and UNICEF's Sanjay Wijesekera.